Well, I promised, and now here I am delivering. And as you couldn't tell by my background assortments and my special t-shirt that I've picked out for this occasion, this video will be a in-depth review of the recently released Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. But before I do, a little bit of background info. So, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse released in December of 2018. To give you a good idea about how long ago that was now, I was only 13 years old and I was in the 8th grade. The movie was directed by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman. It was produced by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who you guys might know for making projects like Clone High, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street, the Lego Movie. They were going to do Solo: A Star Wars Story before they got fired 75% of the way through filming and replaced by Ron Howard. They also worked on the Lego Movie Part 2. They wrote and produced it, but they didn't direct it. That's a very big distinction there. And Phil Lord actually wrote the screenplay to the original Spider-Verse alongside Rodney Rothman. And when Into the Spider-Verse ended up releasing, it shook the world. In some ways, quite literally, because this movie broke all kinds of barriers because, one, the animation style absolutely blew everybody away. This was legitimately one of those once-in-a-lifetime projects that nobody had ever seen before. Like, the animation, the detail, the style of it, the way it was presented, everything about it was just so unique. And the story was really personal, too, as it focused on a young Miles Morales as he learned to come into his own and learning how to become Spider-Man, while also trying to be able to learn the fact that he's not the only one, as there's an entire universe, multiverse of Spider people. And not only is it probably one of my favorite superhero movies ever, it's my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time, and it's one of my favorite films, period. So, needless to say, the hype for Across the Spider-Verse was real, especially with the amount of people that have been attached to its production. Now, the original 3 directors did not return to direct the sequel, as they instead returning in executive producer roles. Rather, we have a new trio of directors. Joaquim Santos, whose credits include serving as director on episodes like Justice League Unlimited, seasons 2 and 3 of Avatar: The Last Airbender. He co-directed the entire first season of The Legend of Korra, while serving as an executive producer on the series. He also served as a co-developer of Voltron Legendary Defender alongside Laura Montgomery. So his credits are kind of stacked in that department. And then we have Kemp Powers. Now, Kemp Powers this is actually not the first time he's worked in the animation world, as he helped co-write the screenplay to the 2020 Pete Docter Pixar film Soul. And he also ended up working on the play and later film adaptation of One Night in Miami, in which Cassius Clay, who would later go on to become Muhammad Ali, meeting up with Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Jim Brown, you guessed it, One Night in Miami. And then finally, we have Justin K. Thompson, who actually previously served as a production designer on the first Spider-Verse movie, so he definitely got a bit of an upgrade in terms of, being the director of the sequel. And then you have both Phil Lord and Christopher Miller returning, not just in a producing role, but they also both co-wrote the screenplay to the movie alongside Dave Callaham. Now, Dave Callaham previously worked on movies like Doom 2005. He co-wrote The Expendables with Sylvester Stallone. He received a story by credit in the 2014 Godzilla movie. He co-wrote Zombieland Double Tap alongside Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick. He co-wrote the screenplay to Wonder Woman 1984 alongside Patty Jenkins and Jeff Johns. He co-wrote the screenplay to Mortal Kombat 2021 alongside Greg Russo. He co-wrote the screenplay to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings alongside Destin Daniel Cretton and Andrew Lanham. And he's also set to write the upcoming live-action remake of Hercules for Disney that is being produced by the Russo brothers. And he's also set to co-write the screenplay to the upcoming live-action Masters of the Universe movie being directed and also written by Adam and Aaron Nee, spelled N-E-E. And then obviously, of course, you got all the cast members that are involved in the movie, like Shameik Moore, like returning members like Shameik Moore as Miles, Hailee Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy, Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker, Oscar Isaac reprising his role as Miguel O'Hara / Spider-Man 2099 from the post-credit scene of the first Into the Spider-Verse. Brian Tyree Henry and... Hold on, let me actually look up her name really quick because I don't want to make sure the fact that I pronounce it wrong. Luna Lauren Vélez as Miles' dad and mom, respectively. And then we also have some new additions, too, in the form of Issa Rae as Jessica Drew, a.k.a. Spider-Woman. Karan Soni as Pavitra Paraka, a.k.a. the Spider-Man of India. Daniel Kaluuya as Hobie Brown, a.k.a. Spider-Punk. And then we also have in the main villain role, Jason Schwartzman as Dr. Jonathan Owen, a.k.a. The Spot. But what is actually the premise of Across the Spider-Verse? Well, the film is set 16 months after the events of Into the Spider-Verse. Miles is still struggling about how to balance between being regular teenager Miles Morales while also still keeping up with his extracurricular activities as being Spider-Man. However, he ends up encountering a mysterious foe named, of course, you guessed it, the Spot. And the Spot, his whole thing is that he's covered in these mysterious black dots that allow him to open up portals anywhere. And I mean anywhere, including throughout the multiverse. So, Miles ends up reuniting with his old friend and potential love interest, Gwen Stacy, and they end up heading to be a part of the Spider Society, a group of spider people who guard the multiverse led by Miguel O'Hara, aka the Spider-Man of 2099. But when Miles and the rest of the Spider Society have differing ideas about how to best handle the threat, Miles not only has to figure out a way how to stop the Spot, but also evading the forces of the Spider Society, he also must redefine what it means to be a hero. Now, as I mentioned beforehand, Into the Spider-Verse is my favorite Spider-Man movie. It is up there with one of the best comic book movies of all time, and which is one of the best animated films, period. So I was very much interested to see what the sequel was going to be about. Somehow, against all odds, they did it. Not only did the creators manage to make a movie that lived up to the expectations of its predecessor, but surpassed them. Like, there's a reason why people are saying this is the Empire Strikes Back of the Spider-Verse trilogy. Because somehow it takes everything that the first film did, which was already incredible, and manages to do it even better. I didn't even know that was possible. Now, the first thing that I want to praise about this movie first, I know a bit repetitive, but I'm very excited to talk about this movie. It's the animation. There is a reason why this movie took 5 years to make and roughly over 1,000 people involved in its production in various stages. Because literally every still of this movie is absolutely designed, animated, painted, drawn, whatever, to its absolute limits. Like, you could legitimately pause every single frame of this movie, frame by frame, and you could get a clear story being told through each and every single still that you see. Like, it is insane. And not only that, but what makes this movie different compared to the first Spider-Verse film is Into the Spider-Verse focused on all these other different dimensions coming to Miles' world, whereas this movie focuses on Miles traveling to different universes. And I really like seeing all the different universes that we end up visiting and the different art styles that they end up taking for them. Like, obviously, of course, we have Miles' main universe of, Earth 1610, and then we also have Gwen's universe as well, Earth 65. And that one feels very reminiscent of the Spider-Gwen comic books that were illustrated by Robbie Rodriguez and colored by Rico Renzi. And it felt like looking at a three-dimensional mood ring, as the colors and the format, everything about it, like even some of the textures, it changes depending on the mood of the scene and the emotions of the characters. Like, that was really cool. And then, of course, we end up having Manhattan, which is the home of Spider-Man India. And I really like the fact that, obviously, of course, it is this blend of Manhattan mixed in with more Indian iconography, but it also feels like you took the city of Manhattan and managed to somehow flip it, if that makes sense. And then the brief little bits of Spider-Punk's world that we saw looked really, really, really cool. And even Spider-Punk himself looked very, very cool as well, as apparently his animation style took 2 to 3 years to finish by itself, and was inspired by punk rock album covers emulating the look of Xerox prints, colored papers, and imagery appropriated from those magazines, and has a genuinely grayed out quality due to copy machines not having toner in them. And to me, the look of Spider-Punk also very much kind of reminded me of, like, you know how like a kidnapper has like a rancid note and they cut out like things from a newspaper, different newspapers, and like glues them together on the paper? It kind of feels a little bit like that to me. And then of course we end up visiting the homeworld of Miguel O'Hara, Nueva York, in the year 2099. And we also end up visiting a secret 6th dimension, and I am not going to be revealing what that one is due to spoiler reasons. But let's just say I very much did like the approach they ended up taking to that dimension too. And another thing that I really like about the movie too is how each individual spider person is animated in their own unique way. Like each spider person clearly has an animation style that is reminiscent of the world that they came from their look, from their movement, to even down to the thwipping of their web shooters. It sounds completely like each thwip for each different spider person is a completely different kind of thwip. That's the amount of level of detail in this movie that it just boggles my mind about how they were able to include this. And without getting into spoilers, because I really don't want to spoil this movie, especially because it just came out, I really, really did dig the story in this movie as Miles is struggling to balance his personal life while being Spider-Man, while also having to deal with the oncoming threat of the Spot, and also having to come into conflict with Spider-Man 2099 and the Spider Society. Another thing that I really love about this movie is its central themes, about how it has themes of growing up and your relationships with your parents. Like the relationship between Miles and his parents is very much at the core of this movie. And I was really invested, I was really into the drama between Miles and his family. And then there's also the themes of growing up and becoming your own person. And there's even themes of defying destiny and doing what's right, because it's not just something that's supposed to be fated to happen. You do it because it's the right thing to do and nobody else is willing to do it. And not only that, but the direction from all 3 people involved. There's a reason why these movies need 3 directors, because these movies have so much in them. From incredible action set pieces to incredibly heartfelt emotions to really, really, really hilarious moments. Like there's a lot of really funny moments and really funny lines in this movie, which you can't expect because it is a Lord and Miller production and they have been known to be very, very funny movies. And also lots of Easter eggs too. Like this is definitely one of those movies that you have to go back and rewatch, not just because one, it's really, really good, but because you need to be able to take that time to absorb all these different Easter eggs and also catch some of the jokes that you may not have caught the first time around because you were too busy laughing at a previous joke. And not only that, but the editing does a really good job of being able to do this good job of balancing between these big action ensemble set pieces while also managing to showcase these really intimate conversations between characters. Like an entire scene can just be 2 characters talking with each other, and the way that it's shot and angled and the dialogue that's being spoken, even though there's really not too big action-y things happening on screen, you're still really invested because of the emotions of the characters involved and your investment in who they are. And you're always invested in the conversation too, either about their personal life or as a means of trying to be able to figure out a way how to disarm a conflict. Obviously, of course, the characters that were featured were all great. Miles is, of course, back as the central protagonist of the movie, and you really empathize with his struggles as you see him struggling to balance between being a normal kid and being Spider-Man now. And also having to come into conflict with a threat that there's a good chance that he might not be able to stop. And not only that, but I really love the fact that Gwen, who's played by Haliee Steinfeld, how she got a ton of play here. Like, she got, like, a ton more screen time. She got the movie opens, like, a good 10 to 15 minutes of this movie. Miles isn't even featured at all. You follow Gwen back on her Earth, and even though Miles hasn't shown up yet on screen, I was still really invested because I was really intrigued to see like how Gwen was, struggling to, continue her work as Spider-Woman, and also her relationship with her father, who is the captain of the NYPD, and also believes the fact that Spider-Woman is responsible for the murder of Peter Parker, her best friend. And so seeing all of that, and the movie actually begins with Gwen and it ends with Gwen, and this is going to tie into a thing that I'm a little nitpick that I am going to address later on in the video, but I really did like Gwen's character arc in this movie, and the relationship that she has with her father, and also the relationship that she has with Miles, as her and Miles might consider pursuing a potential romance, which, isn't too bad. I also really dug the use of Spider-Man 2099 in here, of course, used by Oscar Isaac. And I'm not going to reveal the reason why Spider-Man 2099 is being framed in an antagonistic role. But the reasoning why he's being framed this way and why he's trying to hunt down Miles, you begin to think, that's interesting. Like, you kind of empathize with him, but you also are like, but you could go with different means of, actually pursuing through this. And what also makes Miguel so unique compared to the other spider people is, one, he wasn't bitten by a radioactive spider. His spider powers came from a mix of his genes being spliced with that of the original Spider-Man's. There's also the fact that he doesn't have a lot of the traditional spider powers that Peter does, because he has talons on his fingers and toes that allow him to stick to walls. He has vampiric fangs. He has the ability to have his eyes go just completely all white, I think. But I'm basing this off of the end, like the Spider-Man 2099 comics by Peter David and Rick Leonardi. And fun fact, Rick Leonardi was actually brought on board in order to better adapt not only Miguel's costume design, but also the world of New York, which was very reminiscent of the illustrations of Sid Mead, who obviously worked on films like Blade Runner. And obviously, of course, Miguel doesn't have a traditional spider sense, but all of his other senses are heightened exponentially to the point where he basically might as well have spider sense. And he's also the one Spider-Man that doesn't have a sense of humor. In fact, even the cast and the crew have even dubbed him property damage Spider-Man just because the amount of destruction he leaves in the wake of a battle. And I also really like the fact of how Miguel's role in this movie also helps tie into one of the many central themes of the movie as well. I'm not going to go into which theme that is because I feel like that'd be a little bit spoilery, but it does tie in really well. While Peter B. Parker, played by Jake Johnson, isn't featured in the movie as much as I wanted him to be, for the little bit of him that we got, I am really happy that we saw him. And I'm really happy the fact that we actually see him being a father to his newborn daughter, Mayday Parker. Like, she is adorable. Like, there is a joke that when you first see Peter meet up with Miles and Gwen again, and he has Mayday with him, he says a line, and it was the funniest line in the movie to me. I just laughed my head off in the theater. It was so funny. It was probably a minor line that probably not that many other people would laugh at, but I found that hysterical. But you'll know it when you actually see the movie. Also, I want to mention the new additions to the cast as well. All the new Spider people that we got to see, like Spider-Man India, played by Karan Soni, Spider-Punk, played by Daniel Kaluuya, Spider-Bite, portrayed by Amandla Steinberg, I think is her name. Stenberg, I think is her name. Jessica Drew, played by Issa Rae. And Ben Reilly, who is played by Andy Samberg. Even though they weren't in the movie for a really huge amount of time, the little bits of them that we did get, I thought were great. I love the fact that Spider-Man India basically seems like the one Spider-Man that has yet to go through any kind of personal tragedy whatsoever. Spider-Punk was amazing because he very much seems like the anti-authoritarian type that you'd expect, while also having a lot of that Britishness that you would expect from a character like Spider-Punk. Spider-Bite, I thought she had a really unique design. I also thought the fact that her kind of origin of her being the fact that she's actually an avatar controlled by somebody in a virtual reality, I thought that was kind of cool. Really like the implementation of Jessica Drew in here being a mentor figure to Gwen, and the fact that they're actually taking inspiration from the 2015 Dennis Hopeless run on Spider-Woman, the fact that she's actually 6 months pregnant. And even though he's not in the movie as much, I loved hearing and seeing Andy Samberg as Ben Reilly in this movie. Something that you may not know is Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were actually executive producers on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and they also directed the pilot episode, so that's probably how they know Andy Samberg. And Jorma Taccone, who is another part of the Lonely Island trio alongside Andy and Akifa Schaffer, is also in the first Spider-Verse as he plays the voice of the Green Goblin in Spider-Man 67. And here he plays the voice of the Renaissance Vulture that you see Gwen, Miguel, and Jessica fight in the opening of the movie. So that's probably how they end up knowing each other. The Spa, played by Jason Schwartzman, I thought was a really good villain because initially you see him at the beginning of the movie and you think, oh, he's just a fun, goofy villain of the week kind of thing, and it's to showcase Miles being Spider-Man. But no, they subvert those expectations and they showcase not only is the Spot an incredibly deadly character when he's really able to push his powers to the limits, he is the main antagonist for this movie. And he is incredibly hell-bent at trying to basically tear down everything that Miles loves. And the ties that Miles has to Spot's origin in this movie, again, not going to get into it due to spoiler reasons, but I thought it was brilliant. Hilarious when Orn was basically giving his origin to Miles and explaining how he ruined his life. When he got to one bit during the spiel, I'm like, no way. Like, that's insane. And then obviously, of course, you have Jefferson Davis and Rio Morales, Miles' parents in the movie. They're really good in this too. And I really like the fact that for a good majority of the movie, it is focusing on Miles' relationship with his parents and the fact that he is growing up and kind of feels like he's growing apart from his parents, but he doesn't want to. And he wants to tell them that he's Spider-Man, but he's worried the fact that they're going to not accept him because he's been lying to them for over a year now about having these powers. And it's just, you really feel for Miles and you really empathize with his struggles and you are really invested in seeing how this turns out. And like, just want to briefly mention, because I don't know anywhere else to put this, that ending, like 5 to 10 minutes of the movie with Miles as he's trying desperately to make his way home, that had me on the edge of my seat. Like, it was seriously nerve-wracking how that sequence was going. And the animation there helps expedite that incredibly so. Then we have the score by Daniel Pemberton, who composed the music to the first movie. And dude, he might be one of the best modern composers right now. Like, the music in this movie was so good. Not only was he able to bring back a lot of cues and motifs from the previous Spider-Verse movie, but he also managed to invent all these new kinds of cues, themes, and motifs for every action sequence, every character introduction, every universe that we visit. He's able to come up with some kind of new motif, and he's able to incorporate some kind of that culture and universe and fit it into the music. Heck, there's even a goose honk included as a part of the soundtrack. Yeah, no joke. And speaking of the music, the licensed soundtrack that was produced by Metro Boomin for the movie was also really, really, really good too. Obviously, of course, the first Spider-Verse had some really great licensed tracks from artists like Sway Lee, Post Malone, Nicki Minaj, and many others. And the music featured in Across the Spider-Verse was also really good too, as we feature music from, of course, Metro Boomin, but also other artists like Coy Leary, Sway Lee, Future, Don Toliver, James Blake, Offset, Wizkid, Lil Uzi Vert, 21 Savage, Lil Wayne, Nas, and A$AP Rocky. And something that I think is actually really cool that's worth bringing up is for the Japanese dub of the movie when it releases in about 2 weeks, that ends up having that has an original song completely composed for that version entitled Realize, performed by artist Lisa, which I honestly think is really cool. And she's also performed a couple of tracks for the Demon Slayer anime, so I think that's really cool. That's a really cool get. Some of my personal favorite tracks from, the licensed soundtrack include Calling, Annihilate, and Mona Lisa. Like, those ones are my personal favorites. Now, there is one thing, and it is a very, 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 very small nitpick that I have with this movie. And that is, what makes this so hard to fully judge is, and this was something, the fact that my friend Boom, from the many Discord servers that I'm on, he mentioned about how even though it was really great and really fantastic, you also have to keep in mind this is only one half of a complete story. Because I don't know if you guys remember this, but back when this movie was announced back in December of 2021, it was initially announced as Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1, and the sequel was called Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 2, signifying the fact that Part 1 is going to end on a major cliffhanger. And there were multiple moments throughout the movie that I felt like, okay, the cliffhanger is going to come now. They're going to end the movie right now. But it kept going and going and going. And I'm like, normally this would be a bad thing. But when they did get to the point in which the movie does end, I thought the cliffhanger that they ended on was perfect. As while, yes, it is a downer note, there is still a hint of hope left in it. But not all general audiences might be privy to that fact, because the movie was just retitled as simply being called Across the Spider-Verse, with the sequel being called Beyond the Spider-Verse. Like, there's a good chance that not everybody's going to know that this is going to be a two-parter. So people are going to feel like that some character arcs are going to be completely unsatisfactory, and how they're going to be disappointed by that cliffhanger ending because they weren't aware of the fact that this was going to be a two-part story. But if you feel like the fact that Miles' arc feels incomplete in this movie, that's because it's going to be resolved in the future movie, and that's why Gwen begins and ends the movie. She's the complete arc that we follow from beginning to the ending of this movie. But overall, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a masterpiece that deserves to be seen by all. From the animation, to the story, to the characters, to the action set pieces, to its themes, to its music. It is the rare Empire Strikes Back sequel that not only manages to live up to the reputation of its predecessor, it manages to succeed it. This is 100% going to be the best comic book movie that has released in 2023, and is easily going to be my contender for Film of the Year overall. It is that good. Man, I warned you guys back in the Guardians video the fact that I was going to be talking about this movie a lot. And wouldn't you know it, this was a nearly 30-minute long video. What do you expect? I love Spider-Man and I love this movie. But yeah, some closing notes that I thought I would mention. Make sure to like the video. Share it with those who you think might like my kind of rambly content. Make sure to subscribe and hit the little notification bell to make sure that you don't miss out on any future uploads. I might have a review for Transformers next week when that ends up releasing. I will 100% be talking about Flash when it's released its opening weekend. Rest assured, I am going to be talking about Flash. I didn't make that 15-minute long video talking about the entire history of that movie for nothing. But yeah. And one last note to close this out on is the 10-month wait for Beyond the Spider-Verse is going to be a very, very long wait. But yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As I mentioned before, like, subscribe, comment, share, whatever. And, as always, keep thwipping. No, wait, no, I can do that better. Equally. It's fine. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video.